Hey everyone, this is your favorite friend Jay, and let me tell you today that I have an exciting guest that I'm introducing to you, Whitney Anne. Whitney Anne Adams is a costume designer who worked on multiple projects. One of them, I was just hinting on it on Twitter, and then I discovered this amazing person. It's Piercing, directed by Nicolas Pesce. Hello, Whitney, how are you?
Hello, I'm so good. Thanks so much for having me on.
Thank you for talking to me, really. First of all, I discovered you through Piercing. I know I really want to know more about you, but this movie is so intense. First of all, it stars Christopher Abbott and Mia Wasikowska, who are two amazing, crazy artists. I'm just rooting for them all of the time. And it's directed by Nicolas Pesce, who also made Eyes of My Mother. And you were the costume designer on this film too. So,
Yeah.
how did you get to collaborate with this amazing artist and do exciting costumes for these movies?
I'm so lucky I got to meet Nick. I actually met Nick through my friend Skylar. Skylar Weiss is actually now the general manager of Bazmark, and he was Baz Luhrmann's longtime assistant. So I worked for Baz and Catherine for many, many years, and I worked with Skylar very closely. And he was starting to put this Eyes of My Mother together, and he's like, "You should meet Nick." And then I had an interview with Nick, and that was that. And I love him so much, and getting to do both Eyes of My Mother and Piercing. And I can't wait to do future collaborations together. But he's just a phenomenal person who has such a twisted mind, but is one of the sweetest, most wonderful human beings in the world.
And sometimes they go together, let me tell
Yeah,
you that.
yeah.
Okay, but Piercing had amazing, like for me, someone who just is really into dark things, it had amazing bondage elements and all these S&M costumes. So what was your inspiration for that?
I pulled from so many different places. The movie takes place in this sort of not really reality, but also it's so much is pulled from 70s giallo. There's a lot pulled from like 90s fashion. The book was written in the 90s, so we set the film a little bit in the 90s, but it's sort of jumping all over the place reference wise. So we really wanted to capitalize on that sort of dreamlike element to the costumes. And I was lucky enough, it's a small indie film, but they gave me a really big budget proportionally for the whole budget of the film because they really believed in the costumes. And I made Reed's suit. We had to make 3 of those, and those were custom built because we wanted that sort of Armani American Gigolo style suit. And we actually got the same suit maker who made all of the real Jordan Belfort's suits and made Leonardo DiCaprio's suits for Wolf of Wall Street.
Okay,
So it's the right exact
wow.
for that time period. So, and then getting to do all of the bondage and then the dream elements, thinking back to our little bunny girl and her sort of schoolgirl outfit that's made of pleather. That was one of my favorite moments. And Olivia, who played Bunny Girl, is also the little girl in Eyes of My Mother. So,
Yes.
we pulled a bunch of cast members from Eyes of My Mother for Piercing as well. So it was like a little mini reunion.
And Eyes of My Mother is such a dark movie, but it's also very, I don't know, for me, it was ethereal and dreamy and gothic. How did you, okay, and it was shot in black and white, which really
Yeah.
accentuates the mood. But how do you, as a costume designer, still shine within a black and white setting?
It's definitely a challenge. And for me, I just had my phone on black and white mode on the camera. So anytime I went shopping, I was trying to see what pulled my eye. And so because you can't work with color, you're just working with the tonality of color. And then you really wanted to think about pattern and texture and high contrast. So I was really honing in on what has high contrast patterns wise, what has this like beautiful texture, what plays well together, but what will also pop our actors from the black and white background. So it was a lot of juggling all those things, but our amazing DP Zach was really instrumental in working with me and figuring out what black and white filter I should use when I'm shopping for costumes, what is really going to be the right thing. Some of the brightest colors in real life are so dull in black and white. So it was a really interesting challenge, especially for the first movie I designed myself. So that was a really great challenge right out of the gate.
Oh my God. So Eyes of My Mother was your first
My
made,
first,
and
yeah, that
before
I did
you were,
myself. Yeah.
oh my God. So before you were working with Baz and Catherine, this
Mhm.
was before. So how was, because for me, Baz Luhrmann's universe is a spectacle. Like lately, I was just watching Elvis, and I was so absorbed into the world of Elvis. Same happened for Moulin Rouge for me. Same happened for, of course, The Great Gatsby. I love all his movies. So I just want to know, how does it feel to be inside the Baz Luhrmann verse?
It was a crazy full circle moment. I won't go into the whole long story, but um, Moulin Rouge is my favorite movie. I've seen it over 300 times. I was really sick in high school and I was in the hospital a lot. And so I watched, it was right when Moulin Rouge came out on DVD. And so I watched it every day for almost like 6 months. And so that movie was my touchstone. It mentally kept me going. It distracted me from being so sick. It distracted me from almost dying. And so that movie was everything to me because it got me out of a really deep, dark place. And then many years later, I saw that they were having a costume design contest for their movie Australia, entered the contest, somehow won the whole thing, won a trip to Australia. And then, long story short, was able to start working for them for a couple weeks, which turned into many, many years. And so I love them so much, and they gave me a chance. You know, I had no film experience before I worked on Gatsby. Gatsby was my first movie. And so I'm very grateful that they really took a huge chance on me, and I have a career because of them, and I'm very grateful.
And how does process for costume design for Gatsby with all the intricate and the period pieces? So how does the process just work? Like for an outsider like me, for me, the idea of racks and racks of clothes. This is what I would be seeing, sewing machines and people just
Yeah.
making stuff. So is this how it really works? Just to like for dummies, like costume design on a movie like Gatsby for dummies, aka Jay. How does it
It
work?
was a huge process. I mean, we needed so many costumes. Almost everything we had made for the movie, but things are coming from different places. Like all of our principal men's suits were made in New York. And then I was actually the pack mule who carried them on the airplane to Australia. So, so I had all of Leo's suits with me when I flew down to Australia where we filmed the movie. So we had all of those made in New York. We worked for New York pre-production for like 5 months. And so we did all of I did all the fabric shopping, and we did, sort of a workshop, and got everything sort of prepped in New York. And we had a very small team of 5 people, but then we had a whole workroom of 60 people in Australia who we made all of the women's dresses in-house, and then all of our background suits were made by Brooks Brothers. And so we have things coming from everywhere, and just racks and racks and racks of clothes. And our process for designing a lot of the background too was pretty low tech. We would have all of these scans of dress styles from the period. We would take fabric swatches, staple them on, draw little arrows, be like, this is here. CM would take her Sharpie and then change some of the style lines. Then we give it to our illustrator, who put a mock-up together quick, and then it went to the workroom. So it was just kind of like a streamlined process.
Oh my God. For an outsider like me, this is like, wow, this is like entering a carnival. And this is
Yeah.
what it feels like to see a Baz Luhrmann movie, honestly. Totally unlike the other toned down, like indie projects that you worked on. So was the shift hard, or were you even excited all the way along? Like which do you enjoy best? Which do you find yourself more comfortable in?
I think they're both amazing. I think it's really lucky that I've worked sort of the full gamut of like the smallest budget you could possibly have. Like I was my mother, my entire costume budget was $3,000, which is nothing. And then, you have Gatsby, which is the budget's in millions of dollars. And so having worked on both bookends of I feel like I can do anything now because I've seen both sides of it. And also I came from theater. I got a degree in theater. And so I'm used to doing that sort of like small, scrappy, low budget thing for so many years. So I had that experience as well. And I actually came up in the industry as a tailor. So if I had to, on these smaller movies, I did all the alterations myself. On piercing, I made Mia's skirt for the second half of the movie. So all of those, like that purple skirt, and then her shirt, her purple shirt, like that was a shirt that I hacked up and then dyed because it was a white shirt. So, and she needed so many doubles for all the things that happened. So I made all of that myself because I could. And so having that sort of small and scrappy, and knowing what I can sort of get away with money wise and what I can do myself. I mean, thankfully now I have big teams and I have people who can do all that for me, but I had to start somewhere.
Awesome. Awesome. So you worked on Happy Death Day, right? So
The second
okay,
one, yeah.
Yeah, the Happy Death Day too, which both are my favorite because I love Chris Landon. I'm sorry, I just love the guy so
Love.
much. He's so
Yeah,
crazy
me too.
horror comedy freak, and I love it so much. So, how does it feel to enter a franchise that has already been there? You know, you already have
Yeah.
a lot of the tone, a lot of the costumes, the mask, everything is out there for you. So, how do you invest or how do you implement something new?
That was the tough part because so much of the second movie takes place on the same day. I mean, albeit a different dimension. So finding different ways to play with clothing, like the band t-shirt that Tree wears, we changed the details of it for the alternate dimension. So it's a different, location and different day. So that was a fun little Easter egg to put in for fans. But, I couldn't change the costumes on Ryan or Carter. So that was I was like, oh, but I gave them, in the credit sequence, they all got new looks. So that was really fun. But the hardest thing was actually matching the background because they didn't keep any of the background clothing. So all of those featured people, like the couple on the grass, the barista, the environmental lady, didn't have any of that. And so I had to recreate it. And then literally going by film frame because of course Chris wrote a movie that takes place on the same day. So I had to match every single background in that quad scene. And that was definitely, I think, one of the biggest challenges. And also Chris and I had a big discussion in the beginning, like, does Tree stay in that outfit for the whole movie, or do we get to play around? And so he actually added, because I was like, Chris, please let me give her a big closet. And so he wrote a line for me where she says, I got to get out of these disgusting clothes. And so I was like, thank you so much. So now we get to really play with who this alternate dimension Tree is, because they're not actually Tree's clothes. They're her other dimensional self. And so I loved thinking about what would have happened had her mother still stayed in her life. And I think it really affect her closet and her clothing choices. So really wanted to reflect that, relationship within her clothes.
So, for me, from what I hear you speaking, it's like creating worlds, but through costumes. Like you're part of the storytelling process, but you're creating the characters and the narrative through clothes. What does costume design feel to you, and why were you drawn to this field in the first place? This is what I want to know.
For me, it's definitely Moulin Rouge was like my touch point, after the fact. I'm like, oh, just seeing that, creating that world and creating that fantasy, and all these characters that felt real, they made you feel emotions, they made you feel all sorts of things. And so what I love about clothes is that even everybody in our own lives, we costume design ourselves every day. What do we want to present to the world? And all the little details that I love the most, like one of my favorite parts is research and then really diving into the psyche. So you have to wear all these hats. You have to be a historian, you have to be a psychologist, you have to be a therapist, you have to really get into the mind of the character. And I love working closely with actors and figuring out who they are through their clothes. Like, how long have they had this clothing item? Is it their favorite, or, do they throw it on the ground? Is it wrinkled? Do they take good care of it? Do they not? Is it clean? Is it dirty? Think about all these questions that I think people don't think about in their, day-to-day lives. But all those little choices you don't really necessarily see on first glance in a costume. They're there and they're subtle, and they really help tell the story and make it fully fleshed out instead of one-dimensional.
Definitely, definitely. I totally agree. Wow. So, okay. So, what I want to know is you work with actors. Do actors sometimes have an input into the costume, or it's just you? And which actor you felt was the most, let me say, exciting to work with because they had an idea of how they wanted to present themselves or the character?
I love working with actors because a lot of the times they really have an idea of what the character is. I'm not creating things in a vacuum. I'm not just, here, you have to put this on, this is what you wear. There's certain times that, say someone's a police officer, and their clothing is very much dictated. But beyond that, it's really exciting to, I hop on the phone with my actors as soon as I'm allowed to talk to them. Like, I have to wait till their deal is closed, and it's always like, please, I need to talk to them immediately. And so you really want to get to know, like, also personal preferences. What, do how does your body move? Like, what do you need? Do you have like a foot problem? Do you have like something that needs to also be addressed for your own self personally? But then once you figure those things out, then you can really dive into, like, what does this character mean to you? Do you have any sort of ideas? And sometimes both of us are you know, well, we could go down several different avenues, and then we really find it in the fitting room. And so I love those fittings where you just keep honing in and you try all these different options, but then when you feel it lock in, you feel that character come to life. It's like one of the most brilliant moments of being a costume designer, seeing their face light up and feel like the character. And you know, one of Jess Roth, who played Tree, is one of my close friends now, after that experience, and we just had a magical fitting, just finding who this otherworld Tree was. And I think one of the other ones for me is Brian Tyree Henry, who's also a very dear friend.
Oh
You
my
know, I
God.
styled him for, so we met on the movie Irreplaceable You, and we had such a remarkable fitting where we both sort of found like a similar person in this world. So we just like locked into like loving each other as, you know, like collaborators, and we had the same idea for his clothes and just making him feel amazing in what he was wearing. And then, you know, getting to style him for many years after that. Like, he's such a dear friend, and that was one of the best fittings I've ever had, for sure.
Okay, one of the fittings that I really want to know, was it as magical as I would imagine it to be, is the Killer Man. You styled Liam Hemsworth. Hello. Okay, I want to know all about this. I want to know, how is it to style a very attractive and charismatic man? Okay, tell me all the details.
I think you know, he's definitely a movie star. You walk into the room with him and he has presence and he has gravitas, and he wears clothes so well. And trying to figure out what the right thing for Mo is, you know, that character was really, you know, he's undercover, but then he loses his memory, and like trying to figure out who he is before the memory loss and who he is after was really a fun challenge. But you know, when you get into the room, they're your coworker, and so, you know, as it's just so great to meet these people, but you're also there to do a job. And he was such a great professional and great guy to work with, so it was very fun to find Mo together, and we got to try on a lot of different Hawaiian shirts till we landed on that one that I love.
Okay, this is so cool. Wow. Okay, so now that I know your immense love for Moulin Rouge, is there a movie, another movie that you felt, wow, I really wanted to create designs for this movie, or I wanted to be part of this magic? Has there ever been a movie like that?
Another one movie that I wish I could have been part of the magic is Bram Stoker's Dracula, another one of
Oh,
my favorite costume movies. I love it so much. And Ike Ishioka, the designer, was one of the most brilliant costume designers who's ever been. And
okay.
I got to work with her for a few years before she died. And she was so demanding, but in a kind way. I learned so much from her in a way where you can really expect the best from people and you really demand the like best work possible, but you can also do it in a beautiful, like kind way. And so she
Oh my
walked
goodness.
that line really beautifully, and so that was really inspiring for me. And I was her personal tailor, so I was like making her skirts, I made
Wow.
a TV cover for her house. Her apartment in New York was all white, everything was white, and she was working on Spider-Man, the stage show at the time, so she had all of her Spider-Man renderings on the wall, and there were all these bright colors amidst the white of the rest of her apartment. But she had this giant TV that was you know, a black TV that was taking up too much color real estate in the house, so I made a white cover to go over her TV. But we would do all these projects, and after we were done, she would make a big pot of green tea and she would sit me down at her kitchen table and she'd tell me stories about Grace Jones, tell me stories about Bram Stoker's Dracula set. And I was like, how is this my life? It was only a month after I'd moved to New York that I met her. So, well, like what a welcome to living in a new city.
Wow, exactly. Great welcome. So this is why I'm asking you, where do you get the inspiration? As a costume designer, you always want to watch and read and look, I think, at clothes and people and stuff. So where do you get your inspiration? What are your sources?
Oh, from everywhere. I mean, I'm a big movie person. I grew up watching movies. That's why I've, you know, am in film. So I watch movies almost every night. I read tons of books. I have so many references everywhere. I have stacks all over my office. And so books, magazines, online, blogs, everywhere you can sort of imagine. I love watching other films for inspiration and just to see like what's going on in the world of costume design, and to see all of my peers' beautiful work and other, you know, incredible talents of the industry. So I just love appreciating good, beautiful design. But I finished a movie in the fall last year called The Supremes at Earl's All You Can Eat, and it takes place in 4 different decades, so 1950 to 1999. And so my inspiration came from everywhere. And so I had like Sears catalogs from the 60s. I had actually, I do a deep dive in Flickr all the time. People have family photos up there from decades and decades and decades. And so I'm able to pull so many people's personal photos, which is so important to have real people, not just, shiny pages of catalogs. So
Definitely.
the more I can find real people, and I ask all my friends for their family photos. I'm like, have you scanned in your family photos? I want them, just trying to get real people from, real places. And that inspiration means more than sort of anything else.
Okay, so what I want to ask is a question that I think they're kind of like comparing it to myself. Like there are people who dress perfectly, others don't. Others need a lot of work, a lot of effort. So how do you deal with that? Like I know that okay, people look differently, but it's a movie and there is a glamour about everything. How do you deal with an actor who just has this aura and this charisma and clothes just fit, and others who require, like a little bit of let's work this out, let's tweak here, tweak that.
Yeah, sometimes you have to spend a lot more time in the fitting room just making sure everything is tailored perfectly and put together. And then I have an amazing team who takes care of the clothes on set. And so I'm only on set to establish when there's a new costume, and then I have to run away and do other, prep for what's coming next. And so I have an amazing costumer team who takes care of everything from my truck costumer to my on-set costumers, my supervisor. They're in charge of like upholding what we determined in the fitting room and what we determined when I was establishing on set. So I luckily have very, very talented staff members who make sure everything is perfect, even if it's someone who's supposed to be messy and gross, but like they're messy and gross in the perfect way.
Exactly. In Freaky, it was so
So much blood, all the blood.
It was so gross, but it was just so wonderful. And the Vince Vaughn character too, the clothes that he was wearing. I mean, how can you achieve a gross look? Like, how does this even happen?
My gosh, my age or dyer, Janet, she was constantly working on, it was, I think, 16 or 20 steps to get his clothes to look that disheveled, especially because, it's a black t-shirt on top, and it sort of so much color gets lost. And so she had to do so much, and it was a lot of tests to be like, how much do we see? How much do we not see? We had to sort of go too much in person, and then when you see it on camera, it balances out. But it's so many steps, and we had to do like 20 multiples because he's in it the whole movie, and so much happens, and there's so many effects, especially the ending with the stabbing and the gunshots, and then there's so many things that happen, so we needed all the multiples, and it's a lot of steps to look that kind of disheveled and gross.
At the same time, you have on the other end of the spectrum, you have Jennifer Coolidge. We have a ghost. Okay, how do you dress? Like, how it's so much fun to dress Jennifer Coolidge. I must imagine that. But how do you dress it to make it even more, like charismatic and cool and Jennifer Coolidge in a way?
That one, it's definitely getting every option. What I love doing is getting literally every option that exists in the world. I think I had 4 racks of dresses for that character, and she needed 3 looks. And so she has 2 photo looks, like one for her little ad on YouTube, one for her like poster, and then her main look. And so we wanted to determine the main look first, but I had like racks and racks and racks of every kind of direction you could go. And it really was just trying everything on and seeing what worked for that character. And she's so amazing. I mean, she got into the dress that she ended up wearing. We really were like, okay, we think this is the one. And she dove on the floor to make sure she could do all of her like movements in it. So I just love her dedication to her craft, and she's like so kind and so wonderful, and we had such a wonderful time together. So I can't wait till we get to work together again. It was an absolute blast.
And since we have a ghost, also the ghost. How do you dress a character like a ghost or an ethereal character, one that will stick with the same costume throughout, and there will be something altered to the character and how we see it. So how do you put your, like creativity into action with a character like that?
I think for me, it was really like storytelling. So okay, we determined that this ghost is wearing what he died in. And then you have to determine, okay, what did he die in? And we're also trying to come up with a way to keep his name Ernest, because in the original short story, he looked like the actor Ernest Borgnine. And, David Harbour doesn't look like that Ernest. And also in the original short story, he was wearing a Hawaiian shirt. Well, David is pretty famous for wearing a Hawaiian shirt on Stranger Things. So we didn't want to go that direction because he's already done that and very recognizably. So we want to do something different. And then we're thinking about the types of shirts that had names on them. And I was in a bowling league for a long time. I actually ran a bowling league for 6 seasons. It's a Broadway bowling league, so every Broadway show has a bowling team. And we bowled at like midnight on Thursday nights. I did it for 10 years. And so I have a huge love of bowling. And so it sort of evolved into, okay, let's do a late 60s bowling shirt, because that's when he dies in 1968. And so then I was like honing in on different 60s bowling shirt styles, and that's how I ended up I did a mashup of a bunch of different things to land on that one. And then the back, Chris let me do a lovely little dad pun with the split happens, because I'm such a pun nerd, and so that was very fun. And also the banana splits are one of my favorite teams in the Broadway Bowling League. So not only was it a historic name that originated decades ago, I've saw a lot of different banana splits teams. So it existed in the 60s, that name, but they're also sort of a reference to my dear friends in my bowling league.
Awesome. So, Whitney, you've done a lot of amazing and diverse projects, but what is your ambition? What are you dreaming of doing right now?
I am dying to do a movie musical. I'm a huge musicals fan. I think I have like over 100 different albums on my computer. So I listen to them all the time. They're my favorite. I would absolutely die to do a movie musical. So I hope that happens at some point. And I'm trying to do, I love vintage. I love history. I love mid-century. Actually, going back to how much I love family photos, my great grandfather took over 6,000 photos of my family from like 1910 to 1950. And so I have this like huge plethora of photos. And then, the rest of my family carried on the torch. So I have thousands and thousands of photos. So I would love to do more things that are sort of in the 1900s to 1990s kind of range, especially the 60s and 70s. And that's why I had such fun doing the Supremes, because I got to do stuff in 1950, 1968, 1977, and 1999. So that was a really fun challenge.
This is wonderful. I mean, wow. Like, to imagine the idea, the way that you're saying it. So your family, apart from your childhood as a movie lover, okay, your family had a kind of an influence on you because of that. In a way, the idea that your grandfather was like taking photos of the whole family, like ever since. So did this tradition kind of implement you to be an artistic, creative person as you grew up?
I think so. It's funny because both my parents are not in artistic fields, but they have love of the arts. So my mom was a nutritionist, my dad was a lawyer, but I have two brothers, and so my twin brother got a music degree. He's in IT now, but we grew up being artists. And then my little brother was same. He's a writer, a musician. So we were really artistic kids, and we sort of ran with that, and we loved watching movies. I mean, movies were a huge part of growing up. We would like lay our, tablecloth on the carpet of our living room, and we would have dinner and watch a movie like all the time. And so that's a huge part. And then also this great grandfather who took all the photos. I have his journals from 1919 to 1929.
Wow.
And he has an entry. They went to LA all the time. They were from Maine, but they would drive to LA for the summer, for the winters. So they would avoid Maine winters, and they went to the movies almost every night. And one of my favorite entries is the day that they could take off their masks in the movie theater. The pandemic was over in I think it's 1919 or 1920 when in that entry, and he's like, and the masks, we could take off the masks in the movie theaters, there was much rejoicing. And so I feel such a kinship with him that now 100 years later we're dealing with the same thing. So
Yeah.
yeah,
It truly
my
seeps
family
into
has
you.
been movie lovers forever.
Definitely. I can feel sometimes even when they're not in the art field or just doing anything artistic, but you can have parents who have invested in you or instilled in you the love of art. This happened to me too, which is hence I'm a writer. So yeah, I can
Yeah.
totally, this is why I ask you because I feel the connection, when you're
Mhm.
immersed in this world as a child, somehow you grow up and you can't let go. So you just try to find your way and how can I make it a reality? How can I make it a job that pays? So yeah, and each of us takes a different turn. I totally feel it.
Completely. I grew up such a, my twin brother and I we would run home after school and watch as many movies as possible. Whenever I was homesick, I would watch either the entire Indiana Jones trilogy, Indy, one of my favorites, or the entire Star Wars trilogy. So, I'm a big populist movie lover too. I love Spielberg. I love all those things. They give me so much joy and they're my comfort movies. And so I love every part of the film industry from, indie dramas and buzzy award films to big popular movies. I just love movies.
Wow. Well, I can feel it. And I want to discuss your movie love for so long because I'm the same. I'm cinephile. I love all kinds of movies and I watch all kinds of movies. So, yeah. So, what I want to ask you is, as a movie lover, I watch a lot of movies from different places. And there are movies that are from different cultures, different countries, like In the Mood for Love, for example. I'm a big fan of Wong Kar-wai. Oh my, you love him.
Yes.
Please tell me.
Yes.
Oh God. Okay. So how does it how do you see like a foreign movie like from a standpoint of a costume designer, like a French movie in the 60s where people were so cool and you can feel their clothes, their style, or like something like In the Mood for Love or Chungking Express where it's just modern Hong Kong and people are just going. How do you see it from a standpoint? Does it give you inspiration? Does it give you interest? Are you ever curious to be a part of a world that is so different to you? I want to know your viewpoint.
Oh, completely. It's so important to watch foreign films and to expand uh, film horizons outside of just the United States because it's so limiting if you only see things that are in English. And there's so many incredible films out there. One of my favorite films that I saw earlier this year was Athena, a French film that was on Netflix. And, it's such a gorgeous, gorgeous film. And just people wouldn't necessarily think about the costume design of that film, but there are so many people in that movie and having to coordinate all of the stunts, all of like changes and things happening, especially on those really, really long takes. And so imagine if I chose not to see it just because it was in French, you're really limiting yourself if you can't get above the subtitles or I much prefer subtitles to dubbing. That's my personal preference, but the great thing is that there's so many opportunities to choose what works for you. And there's so many gorgeous, amazing, incredible films from countries all over the world, and I think it would be a mistake to not expand our horizons. So I love watching things from everywhere. I'm actually trying to learn French right now, so I'm watching a lot of French movies. So I watched a ton before, but I'm watching even more now to try to work on my French.
This is awesome. Wonderful. Okay, so let me ask you about, like highly stylized TV shows like Sex and the City and Emily in Paris and stuff like that, where it's a lot of costumes and a lot of designer clothes and stuff like that. So which is more, from a standpoint of a costume designer, which is more cool to be a part of? Like a show that has all these designers in and all these high-end fashion, or something where you can scrap off, like fabric and stuff like that and do it from scratch?
For me, I much prefer doing it from scratch. Like, there's plenty of other costume designers who love working with fashion houses, and I think they're so incredible. Like, it was so great to work with Prada and Tiffany's and Brooks Brothers on Gatsby. That was such an amazing experience. And, I love getting to work with brands, and I especially try to use smaller, and local brands as much as possible. I also there's this amazing service called the Black Designers Database that was founded by Charlize Antoinette Jones, another brilliant costume designer. And they connect me with different Black owned and BIPOC owned businesses. And that is so important, places that I maybe wouldn't normally find on my own, and getting to connect with some amazing artists. So I love that part of the fashion and clothing industry. But for me, my favorite thing is to create things myself because you have total control over the look and the style, especially if you're doing a color story. You're trying to tell the story through shapes and other things. So you really have full control over it. I mean, we got to do that on Gatsby, even all the things, Prada made 40 dresses with us, but like CM and Prada designed those together. And so that was a little piece of the whole film, but we got to create everything else ourselves, and having that complete control, like, you can see it in every frame of that movie, and Sam won the Oscar for it, so that was pretty exciting. It's just really fun to have complete creative control over it.
So, okay, as controlled as you describe it, sometimes things go our on set, something that happens, an accident happens, or something that is crucial, and you have a schedule and you have whatever shooting and stuff like that. So, do you remember something that strikes in mind as, like, wow, what happened? What am I going to do? And how you helped to save the day?
The biggest, most recent one was actually on We Have a Ghost. So in Jennifer Coolidge's character jumps out a window. So we had a stunt double for her, but on the morning of her stunt double hurt her back and couldn't do the stunt. And we were like, well, we have to do the stunt today, and enter one of our lovely stunt men. And I had to run back to my truck and fit him in Jennifer's outfit. He had never worn heels before, and so it was and he had to run in heels and jump through a window. So major props to him for like being game. He had to get all of his hair on his arms and legs shaved. Like he went full for
awesome. Kudos to him. I love him.
It was incredible, but it was a really great example of teamwork where he was game, hair and makeup was on top of it. We rushed to get it. Luckily, it's the caftans who were able to like fit it and get it in, and also him and the female stunt double had the same size shoe, and so he was able to wear the heels.
Okay, this is cool. This is cool.
So that was we somehow were able to make it all work, and he's like, I don't know if I can run in these. I was like, see, and he had a newfound appreciation for women who wear heels. He's like, I didn't know it felt like this. So I was like, now you know. How painful.
I know. Now you know. Now you know. And as a really short woman, I'm always in heels most of the time. So yeah, I wish people would appreciate it really more.
They're painful. I was actually an extra on Gatsby for a day, and so I wore some of our shoes that we had made, and they were like 4-inch, and I was like, I don't know how people are doing this every day. I mean, so I'm very conscious when I put a character in heels and make sure that, what type are they? Is the actor comfortable wearing them? Are they okay with the heel? Do we need to get a chunky here that's more comfortable? So I'm always very aware of comfort, because you have to be in something for like 14 hours, a whole day. Like it can't be excruciatingly painful unless, something requires it, but that has to be a very special case. And a lot of times when I have characters who have a lot of stunt doubles, because I do a lot of movies with stunts, I'm very aware that, okay, maybe I can design the real costume, like a, say, Tree's outfit in Happy Death Day 2, when she goes through the window at the end of the movie and she's wearing that jean jacket. Well, I designed that costume around the stunt, because I wanted to make sure that the stunt was as safe as possible. So having that thick denim jacket was really great. So, you're really thinking of not just what works for the character, but also for everything that costume has to go through. And I'm very, very aware of stunt safety. Especially I have a lot of friends who are stunt actors and stunt coordinators. So it's a huge part of my brain too. So you're not just thinking about the design, also what is it going to go through at the same time?
Because they're humans and they're wearing these clothes. I remember watching, it was an Egyptian movie. I hope it was, it's called The Immigrant by director Yusuf Shaheen. And I hope you can find it and watch it, because they had, like period pieces from the time of the pharaohs and stuff. And I watched the costume designer talking, and she was like, these are real humans. So I wanted to be historical accuracy, but at the same time, just fit it around them so that they could move and do the scenes. So yeah, exactly. Your words kind of like typically match hers. And this is such
that's the tough part, that some people who are costume historian fans or clothing historian fans who are like, well, this in the show isn't 100% accurate. I was like, well, it was never meant to be, because film and TV, there's so many other factors that go into what is perfectly accurate. And so maybe it's a choice. I mean, in Gatsby, we took all of the, an insane amount of research. We researched for months and months and months, but we used that as our foundation. But we also wanted to think about what a 2013 audience was going to feel. We wanted the parties to feel modern, because we wanted the audience to understand what it felt like to be at those parties. So the heels were higher, the skirts were shorter. So we knew what was historically accurate, but we tweaked it for an emotional effect, for storytelling effect. And I think every, production does the same thing. And so you really have to think about story above everything else, and also cast safety and movement. You can't, well, it would only be this way in real life. Well, we're not doing real life, we're making a movie. So
Exactly.
you have to really adapt depending on the circumstance.
And as like you love superhero movies, are you a fan? Okay, so
Oh yeah, yeah.
one of the movies that I really love is Batman Returns with Michelle Pfeiffer and the cat suit and the way that it was sewn between leather. So imagine, what do you think it would be like to create this image of Catwoman? Because for me, it was, I think, the most iconic Catwoman I've ever seen. And I love Selena Kyle in this movie so much. She's one of my idols, actually. And the idea of that transformation scene. So what do you think you could put in? It's like, I love it. I'm just a big fangirl of this scene. What do you think is the input that you as a costume designer you would put into, like we know the cat suit, we know the bat suit. What can you do to make it even a little bit, like, yeah, this is me. I added the Whitney on it.
Right. Yeah. It's so much of it is really getting all of the images that you can and really diving. It's a lot of digging into what exactly is the top point of storytelling you want to do. So take the cat suit. Okay, it's a cat suit. Get every sort of images of cat suits that exist. What's out there? What design style feels cool? And then you play around with, say, probably, on a movie like that, you have lots of different illustrators doing different design concepts. So you have boards and boards and boards of different directions. And a lot of it is gut feeling. You see something, you're like, that feels right. Sometimes you can't describe exactly why, but it just feels correct. Kind of like when I'm in the fitting room with my actors, and I was on The Supremes, one of my lead actors was Anjanou Ellis, who's incredible, and we had such a wonderful time. But we found her character in the fitting room, and I had racks and racks and racks of clothes, but her character was very, very, very particular and very specific. In the text, it basically, her text is like her clothes were virginity insurance, but like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
It was a joke, like she's not stylish.
Yeah.
But that could mean anything. What does not stylish mean? But she's comfortable and confident in who she is, so she has to love her clothes because she is a confident, strong, amazing character. So it's walking that line to, what do outside people think of her clothes? Where do the clothes come from? So once we found it in the fitting room, you couldn't really describe why the direction was correct. It just was correct.
It just felt like that. Wow.
Gotta go with your gut.
Exactly. I feel like these are magical moments for you. Have you ever had, like, how many times did you feel like you stood in awe of what happened? Like you saw the character.
All the time.
Oh my God, you're such a fangirl. I love you.
I love it so much. I mean, that's what I love doing what I do. Like, being a costume designer is extremely hard. It's so difficult. You're working like up to 18 hours a day. Sometimes you wake up to emails, you go to sleep to emails. You're on set for 12 to 16 hours. Like, it is not for the weak. It is a tough one.
For the faint-hearted.
Yes, exactly. It is really, really, really hard. But at the same time, I couldn't imagine doing anything else with my life. Those moments are everything. You can't quantify those. You can't put a price tag on those. Those are just the most special moments that I've been a part of. I remember on Gatsby, when we worked for 9-10 months making all of these party costumes, and we'd get on set to do their first time they're doing the Charleston and dancing on set, and we're filming in 3D, so I have my 3D glasses on, I'm sitting at the tent, and like they all start dancing, and I'm just bawling because getting to see all of our hard work come to life after so many months of hard, like you can't beat that. There's nothing better than that moment. And the funniest thing was, we didn't have the music yet. Jay-Z was working on all of that, but our temp track was Party Rock Anthem by LMFAO.
Hello.
Which, so every time I hear that song, I start like getting weepy because it reminds me of that time, getting to see them all dance and all the costumes move together at the same time. And that was the moment I was like, I have to work in film. I'd never been on set. I'd been a big movie fan, but I worked in theater up to that point. And that was my turning point where I'm like, this is what I need to do with my life, and this is where I'm meant to be. And it was a pretty powerful, cool moment.
Course. So what else did you watch? Like which movies you felt they moved you to a way that you felt like you wanted to be part of the experience, or you just felt moved by? Like I saw on your blog you were writing about Mary Poppins, right? So what else was a moment like that? Like you
Yeah,
have Moulin
yeah.
Rouge, you have Mary Poppins. What else?
Yeah, Mary Poppins was the first one for sure. I was learning to talk, and then had a terrible British accent for a year because I watched Mary Poppins literally every day. And then I got to eventually work with the costume designer of Mary Poppins. So that was another great full circle moment for me as well. I archived Tony Walton. He passed away a couple years ago. He was a gem of a man, and he taught me so much. I learned so much from him, but I got to archive his life's work for the Library of Congress. And so we would sit together every day, and he'd tell me stories from every project he ever did, and especially Mary Poppins. And I remember my mom, when I was 3, dressed me as, or 2, I think, dressed me as Mary Poppins for Halloween. And I gave Tony that picture of me as Mary Poppins.
No, that's so cool.
One so my love of film started immediately. And, you know, other movies that I absolutely like wish I could have, for just process are, The Matrix, or Raiders of the Lost Ark. All of my favorite, John Muller's work in Star Wars, and all of those sort of iconic character building moments. I mean, you think about all these characters that we have known and loved for decades. I mean, that's the work of a costume designer, and that is pretty darn special.
Amazing. I know. And as a movie aficionado, like I'm always going back to movies which kind of like shaped my character or shaped even my thinking and stuff like that. So I like to know, apart from the spectacle or the costumes, which movies kind of like touched on your soul, or you felt like this is my movie. I feel so comfortable watching it, or I feel so protective of it if someone is like, ah, this movie is trash. So I just want to ask you, as a fellow movie lover, which movie do you feel that way about?
Yeah. Definitely, Moulin Rouge is up there at the top of that list. That's for
Yes,
sure.
that's the
That's
goat. What else?
that's the one where I'm like, that is my everything. But also, Baz and his work are not for everybody. I'm also a person who, like, I know that everyone's got a personal taste, and his is so pushed in one direction that 100% is my taste, but it's not everybody. So at least I can like understand, hey, if that's not someone's cup of tea, that's okay. That's why so many different movies exist. But for me, that's it. That's everything. And also getting to tell Baz and CM how much that movie saved my life, getting to tell them in person and getting to work for them, and that was an incredible moment that I still can't believe happened.
Definitely. Okay. Wow. So do you have something coming up right now, Whitney? Like, what is your next project? What are we going to see with Whitney
I
in the
can't
credits?
tell you much, but I'm about to head to Savannah, Georgia for my next project. So it's a really cool horror movie. I'm very excited. I'm not
Okay.
can't say anything else, but it'll be very, very fun.
A little bit of clues, Whitney. Come on.
So stuff.
Any clues?
I know I can't, not yet. And I haven't made a horror movie in a minute. So yeah, it's been like my last one was Paranormal Activity Next of Kin. So it's been a minute since I did that. So I'm excited to get back into that space. But I love doing everything. I mean, that's what I love about this, is that, I just finished The Supremes at Earl's All You Can Eat last fall. So that will hopefully be coming out later this year.
Can't wait.
I also had a movie that just premiered at South by Southwest called Story Ave, that I'm super proud of. And that is another different type of, I love getting to do all these different types of storytelling. I love all genres of film. So getting to work in everyone has been super exciting. And it was really great to have We Have a Ghost come out this year and have so many people see it and love it. And I'm so proud of it. I think it's the type of movie I would have loved watching growing up, especially me, the person who loves adventure films and anything where people go on an adventure and grow as people. And that's what I love so much about what Chris did with We Have a Ghost. So it was exciting to have all of those coming out this year. And then, yeah, we'll see what happens after that.
Okay. Well, I'm so happy to talk to you, Whitney. It was such a pleasure. You're amazing and full of stories, and I can't wait to see all your other projects, and maybe we can come back again to talk about more projects when we watch them. Thank you for coming.
I would love that. Thank you so much for having me. It was so much fun.
It was so much fun. Bye bye.